I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. I'm 64 years old and I have lived through things that should have broken me. But that night, sitting at my kitchen table in Sudbury with a cup of tea I never touched, I thought, this might be the one that does it. Let me tell you what happened. My grandson's name is Eli. He'll be 17 in March. And if you met him on the street, you might not notice anything different about him at first. He's tall like his grandfather was, with these quiet dark eyes that seem to be looking at something just past whatever's in front of him. He doesn't always answer when you call his name. He takes a long time to respond in conversation, sometimes so long that people think he hasn't heard. He has ADHD and he is on the autism spectrum, and he was diagnosed when he was 3 years old. His mother, my daughter, left when he was 4. I don't say that to make you hate her. I say it because it is what happened, and I have spent a long time learning the difference between those two things. What happened and what I feel about it. They are not always the same. Her name is Vanessa. She was 26 when Eli was born, and she was not prepared. I don't think any of us were, not really, but most of us don't have the option of walking away. She did. She was living with Eli's father, a man named Derek, who left about 8 months before she did, and I think when he went, something in her just went too. She called me one evening in January, and I remember it was January because there was an ice storm and I had been watching the freezing rain hit the window over the sink, and she said, "Mum, I can't do this anymore. I need you to take him for a while." A while. Eli was 4 years and 3 months old. He had just started speech therapy at the Children's Center on Paris Street. He was sleeping in a toddler bed with a quilt my mother had made, and he had a specific way he needed the blanket folded. Just the top corner turned down, not the whole edge, not all the way back, and if it wasn't right, he would stand beside the bed and make this small low sound until someone fixed it. I knew that about him. I had been the one at those appointments, those early intervention sessions, holding Vanessa's hand in waiting rooms while she cried because she didn't understand what the therapists were telling her. After she left, I learned quickly I had no choice, and I want to be honest with you about that. There were days in that first year when I sat in the parking lot of the grocery store, and I cried until I couldn't anymore, and then I went inside and bought what I needed, and I went home and made dinner. I am not telling you this to say I am exceptional. I am telling you this because I think you deserve to hear what it actually looks like when someone chooses to stay. Eli's early years were, there is no other word for it, hard. Not because of him, because of every system around him that was not designed for him. The school boards, the wait lists, the funding applications, the IEP meetings, where I sat across from people who meant well but kept describing my grandson in the language of deficits and limitations. He can't. He won't. He struggles to. I started bringing a notebook to every meeting. I started learning the legislation. I am a retired bookkeeper, not a lawyer, not an educator, but I can read, and I can remember, and I made sure I knew exactly what Eli was entitled to under Ontario law. Vanessa sent money sometimes, not regularly. She had moved to Vancouver. I heard this through my sister, not from Vanessa directly, and had a new life there. She called on Eli's birthday for the first few years, and then even that stopped. When Eli was about 7, he asked me once why his mother didn't live with us. I told him that sometimes grown-ups have a hard time, and that she loved him, and that he had me. He thought about this for a long time, and then said, "Okay," and went back to the drawing he was working on. He was always drawing. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the things he struggled with, but the things he could do that I had never seen another child do. By the time he was 5, he was drawing architectural floor plans. Not scribbles, not the shapes children make when they're pretending. Actual floor plans with walls and doors and windows in proportion. I didn't understand what I was looking at until the occupational therapist saw one and stopped mid-sentence. She said, "I'm sorry, did he draw this?" "Yes," I said. "Yesterday, while I was making lunch, she looked at me and she said, 'Mrs. Colborne, your grandson has a very unusual mind.' I knew that. I had known it since the first week he came to live with me. The question was always just how to help that mind find a door that opened. The door turned out to be code. It started with a tablet I got him for Christmas when he was 11. Educational, the woman at the store said. And she showed me some apps that were supposed to help with reading comprehension. Eli was polite about those. He thanked me and put them in a folder. Then he found a free coding tutorial. I don't even know how. I didn't show him. And he sat at the kitchen table for 4 hours without looking up. I put a sandwich next to him around noon. He ate half of it without noticing. By 3 o'clock, he had completed the entire beginner course and was halfway through the intermediate one. I sat down next to him and I said, "Eli, do you like this?" He didn't look up. He said, "It's logical." That was his highest praise. Logical. Things that were logical made sense to him in a way that most social situations never did. Numbers behaved. Patterns repeated. If you put the right things in, you got a predictable result. For a kid who spent most of his life confused by why people said one thing and meant another, coding was a revelation. By the time he was 13, he had taught himself 3 programming languages. I had no idea what that meant practically. I just knew he was happiest when he was building something on that screen, and I bought him a proper laptop and signed him up for a class at the public library that his teacher at Llewellyn Park Secondary had recommended, and he sat in the back row and didn't speak to anyone, but he did every single exercise and then some. His teacher, a young man from Lively, whose mother I actually knew from church, pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "I want you to know that what Eli is doing is not normal. I mean that in the best possible way. He's solving problems in ways I've never seen students solve them. He's building tools for himself to compensate for things he finds difficult, and those tools are genuinely elegant. You should think about where this goes." I didn't know where it would go. I just kept the laptop charged and the internet paid and tried to stay out of his way. The app started as something Eli built for himself. He has difficulty with scheduling. The abstract nature of time has always been challenging for him, and he built a visual time management system that worked the way his brain worked. Not a calendar exactly, but something that combined visual blocks and color coding, and a gentle alert system that didn't startle him. He showed it to me one evening and walked me through it very carefully, the way he did when something mattered to him, speaking slowly and precisely. And I said, "Eli, this is remarkable. Have you thought about whether other people might want to use this?" He had not thought about that. He thought about it for several days. Then he came back and said he had looked into how apps were published and distributed, and that there were some things he would need help with that he didn't know how to do yet. We figured it out together. That's the honest version. He built it. I helped him understand the business parts, the accounts, the paperwork, the things that required an adult with a credit card and a mailing address. He was 15. The app went live in the fall, And in the first 2 weeks, 2,000 people downloaded it. I thought that was extraordinary. I called my sister and told her, and she said, "Oh, that's lovely." And I could hear that she didn't understand what I was saying. By the end of the following year, Eli's app had been reviewed by 2 disability advocacy publications featured in a newsletter from the Center for ADHD Awareness Canada and downloaded by over 80,000 people. He had upgraded it 4 times based on feedback from users who messaged him through the developer account. He read every message. He responded to most of them. This licensing deal came through a company based in Toronto. I won't say their name, but they approached Eli and they offered him something that made me sit down when I read the number. He was 16 years old, and what they were putting on the table was $1.4 million for an exclusive licensing agreement, plus a consulting role that paid a monthly retainer. I am a retired bookkeeper. I have never in my life had a conversation that involved a number like that. I contacted a lawyer, a proper one, an intellectual property lawyer in Sudbury who had done technology work, and she sat down with us and went through every line of that agreement and told us what to watch for and what to change. Eli sat at that meeting with his headphones in one ear and asked 3 questions that the lawyer later told me were more incisive than questions she'd received from adult clients with decades of business experience. We signed in March. By April, the money was in trust. I did not tell anyone except my sister and my lawyer, but somehow word travels. I don't know how. I have theories. A cousin who saw something on social media. Someone at the school. I genuinely don't know. But in May, about 6 weeks after we signed, I got a phone call. I knew her voice immediately, even though I hadn't heard it in almost 3 years. "Mum?" she said. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. There was a pause. She said she'd heard things were going well. I said yes. She said she'd love to reconnect, that she'd been doing a lot of work on herself, that she'd been in therapy, that she had been wanting to reach out for a while and just hadn't found the right moment. I listened to all of it. I have had a long life, and I know how to listen to someone say something without letting it move me before I understand what's really being said. I asked her what she wanted. She said she wanted to see Eli. I told her I would speak with Eli and let him know she had called and that the rest was up to him. She thanked me. She sounded emotional. I said goodbye and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after. I told Eli that night. I chose my words carefully. I said his mother had called, that she wanted to be in touch, and that he didn't have to do anything he didn't want to do. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "Is this because of the app?" I didn't answer that. I said, "What do you want to do?" He said he didn't know yet. He'd think about it. He thought about it for 11 days. I know because I counted. On the 12th day, he said, "I'll talk to her on the phone, not video, just phone. And you have to be home." I was home. I sat in the next room, and I listened to him be polite and careful with her, the way he was with everyone who was new to him, answering her questions about school and the app with short, measured sentences. It lasted about 20 minutes. When he hung up, he came and sat across from me, and he said, "She sounds different than I expected." "Different how?" I said. He thought about it. "Softer," he said, "like she's trying." I nodded. He said, "She asked if she could visit, and..." I told her I'd think about it, he said. He didn't say yes to the visit for another month. But eventually he did, and Vanessa drove out from Toronto. She had come back from Vancouver the previous winter, I learned. And we sat in my living room for an afternoon. It was awkward, and it was careful, and it was not at all the emotional reunion that I had spent 12 years imagining, both fearing and secretly hoping for. It was just 3 people in a living room in Sudbury, figuring out how to talk to each other. I thought, naively, that we were moving towards something. A slow reconciliation on Eli's terms, at Eli's pace, that was what I wanted. For his sake, what I was not prepared for was the letter. It arrived by registered mail on a Tuesday in August. The return address was a law firm in Toronto. I signed for it, and I took it inside. And I sat down before I opened it because something in me knew already. It was from Vanessa's lawyer. It was requesting, on behalf of my daughter, a formal review of the guardianship arrangement that had been in place since Eli was 4, on the grounds that circumstances had materially changed and that it was in the child's best interests for his mother to resume parental rights. It was 4 pages long. I read it 3 times. Then I called my sister, and I couldn't speak for about a minute. She came over. She brought my brother-in-law, who is a quiet man but had the good sense to make tea and not say anything while I cried. My sister, to her credit, said exactly the right thing. She said, "Okay, now, what are we going to do?" Because that was the only question that mattered. I called my lawyer the next morning. She had already been sent a copy. She was calm and direct, which is what I needed, and she walked me through what the filing meant and what our options were. She said, "Mrs. Colborne, I want you to be prepared for the fact that this is going to be difficult. Biological parental rights carry significant weight in family law, even when the parent has been absent. The fact that Eli is now 16 and that he has the capacity to express his own preferences helps us. But I won't pretend this is simple," I asked her directly. "Could we lose?" She paused. She said, "There are scenarios in which the court might rule in favor of some form of shared arrangement. Outright parental transfer at Eli's age is unlikely, but I want you to go into this with clear eyes." I sat in my car in her parking lot for 30 minutes after that meeting. Then I drove home and I made dinner and I waited for Eli to come downstairs. I told him that evening. I decided not to wait, not to protect him from it, because he was 16 years old and it was about him and he had the right to know. I told him his mother had filed legal paperwork seeking to change the guardianship. I told him what it meant. I told him what our lawyer had said. He listened with his eyes on the table between us. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "She knew about the licensing deal before she called the first time, didn't she?" It wasn't a question. I said, "I believed so." He nodded very slowly. He said, "Okay." Just, "Okay?" He looked at me then and he said, "I'm not worried, Nan. I've been keeping records." I didn't understand what he meant at first. He took his phone out and pulled up a folder, and he started showing me, quietly, methodically, a documentation system he had built over the past 6 weeks. Every phone call with Vanessa time-stamped and noted. Every visit with his own written observations recorded directly after. Every message she had sent him, and embedded in this folder. Screenshots of something I hadn't known he'd found. A conversation Vanessa had had on a parent support forum, posted under a pseudonym, where she had described her situation in terms that made the financial timing very clear. He had also logged every single thing he could document about our last 12 years together, his medical appointments, his therapy sessions, his school records, his IEP meetings, awards, report cards, the letter from the ADHD center. He'd organized it all by year, going back to when he was 5. I stared at my phone in my hands. I said, "Eli, when did you do all this?" He said, "I started the night you told me." She called. I thought about that. That was the night of the first phone call, before the letter. Before any of this was legal, I said, "You knew, didn't you?" "Before I did," he said, patterns repeat. "I've been thinking about this since I was little. I just hoped I was wrong." The hearing was 4 months later in December at the Sudbury Courthouse on Elm Street. I had not slept properly in weeks. My lawyer had filed everything, had organized Eli's documentation in a way that made her say, in 12 years of family law practice, she had never received anything like it from any party to a custody proceeding. The family physician submitted a letter. Eli's school submitted records. His occupational therapist since age 7 submitted a 3-page report. Eli requested to speak. He was within his right at 16, and the judge granted it. I watched my daughter's lawyer speak first. She made a careful, measured case. She talked about maternal bonds, about rehabilitation, about the importance of children maintaining connection with biological parents. She did not mention the licensing deal by name, but she talked about Vanessa being better positioned now to support Eli's. She used the phrase, life trajectory. Then our lawyer spoke. Laid out 12 years without melodrama, without anger, just fact after fact after fact. 12 years of appointments and schools and therapists and advocacy and love. And then she introduced the documentation Eli had prepared, and she let the dates speak for themselves. The forum post, the timeline of contact, the sequence of events. The judge asked Eli if he wished to address the court. He stood up. He was in his good shirt. He has one good shirt, a dark blue one he wore to his school's awards night. And he held a single index card with notes on it. Though I don't think he looked at it once. He spoke for maybe 4 minutes. He spoke in the way he speaks when he has rehearsed something until it is exactly right, evenly, precisely, without filler or hesitation. He said he understood. His mother had been through difficult things, and that he did not hold the past against her. He said he was willing to maintain a relationship with her going forward. But, he said, he wanted to be clear about something. His grandmother had been his parent, not in a legal definition only, but in every practical, daily, actual sense of that word. She had been at every appointment. She had advocated for him when systems failed him. She had made sure he had a room that felt safe and a routine that worked, and a life in which his differences were not treated as problems to be managed, but as the shape of who he was. He did not want that changed, not by a court, and not, he said this clearly, looking at his mother, not by anyone filing paperwork 12 years after the fact. The judge was quiet for a moment. Then she asked Vanessa's lawyer if there was anything to add. There wasn't much left to add. The ruling came in January, 6 weeks later. Guardianship remained with me. Eli's own statement was cited in the ruling as particularly clear and considered. The judge noted that at 16, with the demonstrated capacity Eli had shown, his wishes were to be treated as a significant factor. I got the call from my lawyer on a Thursday morning. I was at the kitchen sink. I set the phone down on the counter when we finished talking, and I stood there for a moment, and then I wept. Not sad tears. The other kind, the kind that have been waiting so long they don't quite know what they are anymore. Eli was downstairs in his room. I went down and knocked on the door frame. He prefers that to knocking on the door itself, and I told him. He nodded. He said, "Okay, good." Then he said, "Nan, I have a user request I've been thinking about. Can I show you?" And just like that, we were back. Back to the kitchen table and the laptop and the next thing he was building. Back to the life we had built. which was not the life I would have chosen, and was also, I know now with a certainty, I could not have imagined at 40 exactly the life I was meant for. There are people who will tell you that a grandmother raising her grandchild is a tragedy, a gap, a failure, a workaround. I used to half believe them in my duckasts, in those parking lots, in those early years. But I look at Eli, at this boy who built something from his own mind that helps 80,000 people manage their days better, who walked into a courtroom and spoke with more clarity and integrity than most adults manage in a lifetime, who still, at 16, needs his blanket folded a particular way and his schedule posted on the wall by the stairs, and I think, what gap? What failure? What exactly is missing here? Nothing. Not one thing. We had dinner together that Thursday, pork chops, because that's what Eli had requested 2 days earlier, when I asked him to plan the menu, and we didn't talk about the ruling or the hearing or Vanessa. We talked about the new feature he was designing and a podcast he'd found about urban planning, which has become a recent interest, and whether we should get a second bookshelf for the upstairs hallway. This is what we are, two people separated by 50 years who found each other at the beginning of a hard road and walked it together and came out somewhere neither of us expected. I wouldn't trade a day of it, not one.